Hey John, Paul here. I just wanted to give you the blow-by-blow on this engine because, we've been working off and on this thing for you for a couple of years. And so the first thing is we found that this chamber right here on the intake manifold, that's a new intake manifold. That's a new to you, used intake manifold right here. What we found was this chamber right here had been left full of water and it had frozen and broken. So that was the first problem that we found that we had to deal with. So we found you removed that and found you a used intake manifold and got that shipped in and cleaned it up and painted it and put it on. We also then ran a compression test on your engine just to make sure that after we got done working on it that it was going to run, that it didn't have any dead cylinders, and you did not. Your engine is in good shape. We bought tune-up parts. We bought a new cap. It's all dusty now, but new distributor cap, new rotor. God damn it. With all the papers. Okay. All right. So anyway, we got you a new cap and rotor. We also got you new. We also got you new points, and we started the engine, and we found that there were some stuck valves. We also, since I see that there's an oil cap on here and gasket set on here for the engine, you might recall that the oil fill cap blew off when we tried to start it. This where'd it go? Oh, this oil fill. Actually, that's the oil fill. It's the dipstick. Oh, there, the cap. Right here, this cap flew off, narrowly missing my mechanic's head. But it did miss. So we had ignition. We had gasoline. Figured out we had gasoline down in the crankcase where it shouldn't be. There should only be oil in there. We thought perhaps we had an oil in the piston or a hole in the piston in order to do that, but we did not find a hole in the piston. We really don't know how that occurred or how we got ignition down in there, but we did. So that was the first go around with the engine. And that was clear back in February of 2020. Then we assumed that we had a problem with the fuel pump. That's why we had gasoline in the crankcase. But we cleaned and assembled the engine. Put the new intake manifold on. Tried to start and test run the engine and found out we had issues with the carburetor right here. So we did a carb repair, put a new kit, and rebuilt the carburetor. Then we installed the rebuilt carburetor in June of 21. We installed the rebuilt carburetor, removed the old fuel line, ran new fuel line from the tank to the carburetor, installed the spark plugs, wires, the distributor cap, installed all that stuff that we bought previously. Installed the fuel filter and housing back here on the fuel system. Finished installing the new fuel line. We found metal in the oil, and the oil cooler was murky, and we thought perhaps the oil cooler, this is right here, we thought the oil cooler might have been compromised, and that might have been how we were getting, you also remember that when we pulled the dipstick, we had water in the oil from the very beginning. So possible water in fuel or in the oil. And as I was talking about this earlier in the recap, perhaps the engine was run with this being breached, because water would have gone in through the carburetor as well, but I don't know, it doesn't seem like it would actually even run in that condition. But we added some oil to the engine. Removed all the drain plugs that had been, or installed all the drain plugs that had been removed for winterization, timed the distributor, and started the engine. And it actually ran, as I recall. Going through, actually ran the engine. Of course, all this was done with the engine out. No, that was with the engine in. And then that's when we realized that we had water in the oil. And so we did adjust the air to fuel ratio on the carburetor, charged the batteries, and attempted to start the engine again. Started the engine, set the timing and the idle speed, and then we ended up, we just added a quart of kerosene to the oil so that we could get rid of the water, drain the oil, we had the water in the oil, checked the oil cooler for internal leaks, didn't have any, retorqued the head bolts, tried to figure out why the gauges weren't working, found that the tach drive wasn't connected, found the oil sending hose had been cut as well as the temp line, and there's no choke cable. Key switch needed to be rewired and replaced. We suspected the engine exhaust manifold may be where that we were leaking water into the engine, as that is the most common area. So this is the exhaust manifold right here. So we thought, well, maybe that's leaking water into the engine. And I have to tell you, we never did find where the water came from. Can only assume that maybe the boat partially sank and water came in that way, or like say water could have entered the engine through here. Or it could have been a head gasket and or an exhaust manifold gasket. And of course, as soon as you take those items off, your evidence is destroyed as to whether, you can't help it, as to whether that was the problem or not. So then, most recently, back in June of this year, we removed and tested, June of last year, we removed and tested the exhaust manifold, looking for cracks right here, this exhaust manifold, looking for cracks. We did not find any problems with the exhaust manifold. Removed the engine from the boat, removed the transmission and the oil pan, and cleaned the sludge out of the oil pan, and then cleaned also and the bottom end of the engine and the flush sludge from the transmission. Reassembled the engine, and while we were reassembling, we went ahead and painted it. Assembled the engine, installed the intake manifold, ignition, and carb again, essentially. Then we discovered these engine mounts right here were shot. The rubber is bonded to the engine mount, both sides of the engine mount. So these guys, the rubber pieces were toast. So we had to buy 4 new engine mounts, installed. We then reinstalled the transmission. We put the starter on and finished putting the engine back together and ran the engine. We ran it on the test stand. We installed the motor mounts. We installed some motor mounts that we had purchased for another customer and reordered for the other customer so that we would keep your project moving forward. The old motor mounts had sagged, and they were very difficult to get off, actually. And then we thought we were waiting on payment from you, and we weren't, I believe, as I recall. Somewhere along the way that happened. And so we got you back off the shelf in October, Don't remember it being this recent. Yeah, I guess so. And we got you back out in October. Installed the engine in the boat. We cleaned the corrosion. Both halves of this coupling were corroded, rusted, and so we couldn't. We needed those mating surfaces to be cleaned so that we could determine alignment. And we actually have to align the engine to the prop shaft. The prop shaft is held at the prop end by a strut bearing, and then the other end of the prop shaft supported on the bearing and the transmission. So we actually make both these surfaces parallel. We have to change the angle and height of the engine to make sure that both of these surfaces on the two sides of the coupling. This half of the coupling is on the transmission. This half is on the prop shaft coupling. So we have to make sure that those surfaces are exactly parallel, and so we had to clean those so that we could put feeler gauges in them and actually get accurate measurements. That's when we found that we couldn't lock the engine down. We tightened the engine down, the lag screws down on the engine mounts, and found that they were spinning in the engine stringers. The threads were just completely wallered out. So we pulled the engine back up, which was no big deal. We hadn't started hooking it up yet. Pulled the engine back out of the way and drilled those holes to a smooth 1/2 inch diameter, then installed dowel rods in the holes with epoxy, and then we set the engine back in place and re-drilled our pilot holes for our lag bolts, and that's the last activity we had on the engine. We have a list of parts that we need to move forward, and I will estimate what that's going to be, what those parts are going to run us, and give you an estimate on that, and to move forward. But that's really, the engine stuff's done. That's really assembly work. Like I said, I think I showed it in an earlier video. I wanted to come back and do a blow by blow and just wrap my own mind around it, which I figured maybe we've started and stopped so many times and had so many delays that perhaps that would be helpful to you as well. So our temperature gauge is an old mechanical gauge, which amounts to there's a well that goes in here, and then there's a bulb that goes in the well, and you can see the end of the cable that's cut off right here. That's the end of the cable right here that had a capillary tube inside it and came up to this well. So the capillary tube, of course, once it's breached, it's no good. It can't be repaired. So we're going to have to repair the gauge and put a manual capillary tube in, or actually my suggestion would be go ahead and convert at this time to an electronic gauge. It'll look the same. It'll be authentic Chris-Craft appearance. And it'll go in the dash right here. Oops, in the dash right here. But it won't have, it'll be electronic instead of having this very fragile, difficult to deal with capillary tube and bulb. I say difficult to deal with. If you ever have to take your engine out, chances are when you go to unfasten the well, the bulb turns and it ruins your capillary tube. So we should switch over to electric while we have the opportunity. The cost is roughly the same. And it was noted that the wiring behind the dash is in terrible condition, so we need to consider at least rewiring behind the dash. We may want to rewire all the way back to the engine. And let's see, you need to consider rewiring all the way back to the engine, that's for sure. Then let's see, here you have oil pressure gauge, and you have your tachometer. I'm not quite sure what's missing from here, what was in that gauge hole, if anything. I'd have to go back and look at pictures to see if there was actually a gauge in that hole to begin with. That's kind of the long and the short of it. Hopefully that was helpful to you. And doing the blow by blow, it was helpful to me. I saw where we purchased you a set of gaskets as I was going through this, and then charged you for some individual gaskets later on. So I need to fix that in your billing, and I will let you know where you stand as far as any money in the kitty that we can start using, or if we need to put more money in the kitty for the next phase. Thank you.